right, you guys, we're changing the schedule around a little bit. We had a break in the schedule, but we're afraid we're going to lose everybody if we take that. So I'm introducing Jim Harding from Multiscale Networks. Jim has an extraordinary long career in the technology world. I love going all the way back to the predecessor who wrote MS-DOS that sold DOS, I guess, to Microsoft. And Jim has spent time at Amazon, and most recently, Jim has been at Multiscale Networks and working with the Providence healthcare system in getting their really understanding healthcare data. And I think Jim is really on the cutting edge of doing so. So Jim's got a presentation here. Let me turn it over to you, Jim.
All right, thanks. What we get to do here is a little preview on, I think, what's going to happen based on some experience extrapolating with this distributed ledger technology. And I like to think about where things will go. It's basically life after the EHR. Some major changes coming, and how will that happen? So if we look at healthcare, way back in '68, we had this MUMP system. It's still around 50 years later, and it's stagnating out there with most of the medical record system companies. But before we can get into blockchain, we got to get past this current crisis of data and look at how do we get to the cloud. Can we even get to the cloud first? It's a big problem for healthcare. And in 2016, my company, we pulled all of Providence Health and Services data into that cloud in real time as it's being generated from Epic. So as people are entering data, we're pushing everything into the Google Cloud, and it's secure and safe and all that, but it's centralized inside of Google. It is secure, but it's still centralized. That's a pretty big lift for the industry. No health systems saying they want to have it. They're afraid of it. We did a partnership with them. It worked. And now it's a model for everyone. In 2018, we're hearing a lot about now healthcare for blockchain, or I like to think of it more as distributed ledgers. That's where things are heading. Is there a demand for it? People are talking about, is there demand? A lot of confusion on the capabilities. There is so much confusion when you talk to people about DLTs and what it can be used for. As someone who's been in technology for 40 years, building various kinds of platforms, I'm not confused, but it is a confusing space. It's also confusing how we can get to the end of the tunnel, but I actually see light there, and I want to talk to you about that. From an investment standpoint, I think it's great. A lot of people missed out on some of these major coin offerings. But if you look at it in terms of what are the next companies to come out of this, it's a huge opportunity. Gartner says it's 10 years out before it happens. I actually tend to believe that. So if you look at Gartner's hype cycle, if you see blockchain up there, it's considered to be 10 years out. And they've got some complementary currencies that are happening right now that makes sense. This is all copacetic. I believe them. If you look at what's happened over the last couple of years in terms of the ICOs in the healthcare space, a lot of companies out there, some good stuff. I talked to the Antiva guys last week at the Hedera Hashgraph Developer Conference. They've got a great thing for physician verification and career management. But there's nothing really monumental happening right now. A lot of peripheral things out there. If you look at the ICOs in healthcare, there actually aren't any winners. They're all losing right now. There's just a lot of kind of hype and chasing and intent, but not a lot of value there yet. If you look at the overall, there's some major winners out there in the technology side of the ICOs and DLTs. If you go in the Wayback Machine here, Rick mentioned, so the company that I was first part of and helped build, we built MS-DOS and sold that to Gates. And that was a time when we're looking at microprocessors and everyone would say, well, you don't need those, they're just toys, they can't compete with mini computers, IBM and DEC VAX and so forth. But we were relentless that we wanted to actually make something happen. Apps back then were considered languages like Fortran and BASIC. Those were the apps. Until the killer app came out, which was Lotus 1-2-3. It was the first considered killer app. And that actually happened and made history. And so where we want to go right now is this new decade of a new internet, and I see it coming. There's some pretty clear signs there to get past the hype. You also have to get past the Debbie Downer type people who think there's nothing here. Well, there is nothing here if you use it in the wrong way, but there's a lot here if you use it the right way. And this comes down to like Nielsen's law. I mean, we're growing at bandwidth of 50% per year. And back in the DOS days, we had 300 baud modems. Today, we're getting near a gigabit. That makes a difference. And the way distributed technologies or distributed ledgers work, they're very bandwidth oriented right now. And so we got this combination of Moore's and Nielsen's law giving us greater and greater platforms. And what happens is, not many people understand Bell's law. Bell's law is a law that says after every 10 years of Moore's law and Nielsen law, you have this major shift where you actually have new architectures coming. So we're on one of these 10-year cycles. And if you look at what's really happening now, you get this sort of second wave DLT technologies. You've got EOS and Ethereum. They're duking it out pretty heavy out there. Out of this came the DApps, smart contracts, utility tokens, which makes sense. There's 3 token types. This one makes sense for healthcare. Lots of funding, but do you want to put your healthcare data there right now? The answer is no. That doesn't make sense. There's reasons for that. If you look at the CEO of Ethereum talks about the Trilemma Factor. Well, we can do 2 of the 3. We can be decentralized and secure and scalable, but not all 3 at once. And what's happening with Ethereum in the public net right now, I don't know if you guys have really followed this, but it's nearing a terabyte in its blockchain size, and it's starting to stretch and crack. It wasn't meant for scalability on the public size. It's a problem. But you can't commit to all those things. So we need to get out of these sort of experimental, interesting technologies, which are good for us all. We need to get more to the commercial side, because when you talk about healthcare and data and so forth, you got to start thinking about the commercial side. So a lot of straining going on. Like I said, I was at the Hedera Hashgraph conference last week, and I got my HBAR coins. And this is a situation where we've gone from, Bitcoin does 7 transactions a second or a minute, and Ethereum does 17. And with this technology, we're at 100 to 200, 250,000 transactions per second. And that's going to enable micropayments that we've never seen before. So at that conference, I was seeing all kinds of things happening with micropayments and these very micro-denominational fund transfers. So it's interesting, it's important. The internet missed funding as part of the model. When the World Wide Web came out, they missed that. It was a crucial miss. But now with coinage and tokens, that's coming back. And so I believe Hedera is a leader in terms of making this work. And we get past a lot of the nonsense of this mining stuff that's going on that's very inefficient. And we can have this asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance that makes it instantaneous. And then we got 39 companies saying we're going to get together globally and make sure that this consensus thing works, and it's optimal, and it never goes down. And we have this least common denominator thing with Ethereum that people don't necessarily realize, is that every node that's out there is the least common denominator one. Here's the smallest node that will run on the Ethereum. Well, that's not a good thing. If you want to run something that's highly transactable, you want something that's a big node. You basically want these sort of mini cloud nodes out there. They haven't announced who they are yet, but I believe in that process. Oops. Also been out there longer is Hyperledger, and this is from the Linux Foundation. You got 200 companies on this thing. Intel and Oracle are building DLTs off this. Super fast consensus. Their ICOs are going to come off the top of this thing. And I believe this is a place for healthcare. I believe this is happening. So from an investment standpoint, kind of forget about the ICOs for a bit. That kind of happened and went away. I'm not sure what our appetite is. It's an interesting model. But from an investment standpoint, let's look at something like Apple, which went from $5 a share to what it is today, at Amazon, $5 to $1,700. look at those kind of investments and realize that they're actually going to happen. This is not hand-waving here. These are going to happen. The question is which ones, who will do it? And healthcare is a great spot to be in. This company I follow, CB Insights, fantastic market guide to blockchains, distributed ledgers. You gotta subscribe to this. What they're talking about is some short-term stuff happening. As I showed you some of those periphery companies, some mid-term stuff happening, periphery companies out there doing stuff without PHI. And then the PHR, this is the personal health record. We're starting to talk about this more versus the EHR. And so they're talking about this will eventually happen. Now, some of us will remember that Google and Microsoft both tried to do a PHR, and there were major failures. They spent a lot of money and lost out. The reason was they didn't really take the time to understand healthcare. Now, I've been doing all kinds of technology companies over the years, and I'm now into healthcare. I've been in it about 7 years. Do I know it very well? No. Do I appreciate it? Yes. Am I going to do something about it? I think so. But I now understand like why they failed, and a lot of it was just politics, not understanding how to approach healthcare, respectfully. The other part was the technology wasn't ready. So we didn't have the Moore's Law, the Nielsen's Law, and we didn't have the Bell's Law of this major 10-year transformation happening. So they couldn't help themselves anyway on that. We'll give you a story here as to why I think you can start looking at where these opportunities are. Back in Amazon, I sold a couple of companies to them, and in September 2001, the stock was at $575. And the morale was just really bad throughout that company. And we're losing money on every product shipped. We spent a bunch of money on these distribution centers, and not a good situation. They built this, what they call the retail platform, and the retail platform was kind of put together quickly over the years, and it had done well, but it wouldn't actually allow third parties to come in. They created a thing called Z-Shops off it. It failed. They created a thing called auctions to counter eBay. It failed. So Jeff Bezos asked me to go build something completely new. So I built a parallel platform to the retail, which we called the Merchants At, which is now known as the Marketplace, and Seller Central. And Jeff Bezos said, okay, if you're gonna build this new platform, Jim, just do one thing for me. I built so much into my brand, don't screw it up. Literally, do not screw it up, Jim. And so I got some patents on seller ratings and that kind of stuff. But the point is that we launched this thing on time, but we had to build a parallel platform. You couldn't just go from the Amazon retail, scrap it and create a new platform, because you would have lost all that opportunity. So we had to do all this stuff in parallel. So in the healthcare industry right now, I'm not suggesting we scrap the EHR. That's not going to happen. What I am suggesting is that we take a parallel track. So I think you might find it interesting kind of where I'm going here, hopefully. So to succeed with this new personal health record model, we have to create a new internet. Now that's a big statement, but it's being created right now. This conference is really about that. It started with currencies. We have these utility things. We have all this, stressed out ICOs, but there's going to be a recovery, and the recovery is going to happen where there's a major need. So these high-performance DLTs, Hedera, Hyperledger, they're good. I mean, it's good stuff. I've checked the gums. It's good stuff. Okay. These EVMs, these virtual machines from Ethereum, it works across all these platforms now. There's a language called Solidity, it's ECMAScript, but and there's chain code for the Hyperledger. These are good languages. They're going to work. They're going to be solid. Had to get through some bugs, but they're going to support us. And then there's the DApps, and they're relatively useless right now. No one wants a DApp. Why would you use a DApp? That's not the point. The point is that DApps are representing a different, lower infrastructure that we're going to tap into that will support this new internet. And then they're going to tap into what I'm calling distributed decentralized data stores. Now, I've been a data guy for the longest time. I built the first local area network-based database. Been doing the network thing for a very, very long time, following databases. I built everything in Bigtable at Multiscale up on Google. That's the biggest, baddest database ever built. And now I'm looking at where things are going for healthcare. How do we get there? And so it's about distributed, decentralized data stores. And what are they? So a bunch of them are coming out right now. Been out for a while. And so the time is now where we need these new components, and they're coming. So for this new internet, we need new components. They're not going to come from Google or Microsoft or Amazon just because they're distracted. They're not thinking about this. And we need new internet thinkers. So they are happening. By the way, the IPFS is Interplanetary Filing System. There's no difference between the filing system on your hard drive, on your notebook, or in a data center. It distributes blocks everywhere, right? But they figured out how to distribute blocks across the planet, right? And you know when something is working, and you know when a trend is going to be true when it actually ties to the truth of how we actually live. So, you know, we have 100 trillion cells. The code is DNA, the data is DNA, the firewalls and these nuclear pores on your cells and so forth. It's all set up for like major distribution with low energy. So major distribution with low energy is this interplanetary file system. It's finally come along. I mean, science, for computer scientists, it's been science fiction for many years. It's just implemented, it's working, and there's a coin goes along with it called Filecoin. So these PHR building blocks, if you will, we need the new components. These incumbents are going to be there, and so what we're going to do is we're going to basically put three things together. High-performance commercial DLTs with maturing functional smart contracts with these distributed, decentralized data stores. This is all here right now. What I'm trying to say that I think that there is a shift happening on the internet that don't get faked out by a lot of the peripheral stuff. They're all good things, but the bigger thing is at hand here. Flatiron writ large. So Flatiron was a company that's only been around for 5 or 6 years. A 32-year-old guy sold this thing for $2 billion. You know, pretty good run there. The point behind it was they sold to Roche. Why did they sell to Roche? Because they figured out how to take a bunch of oncology medical records, a bunch of monkeys behind the curtain back there would type these unstructured notes into relational databases. They curated it, and so they ended up with 2 million records. They sold the thing for $2 billion. That's $1,000 per record, a pretty good deal. But I think that's a good thing because it's telling us what's going to happen in the future. We don't need to be doing this anymore. It's kind of not the right way to do it, but there's a better way to do it. So what is Flatiron writ large? Flatiron writ large is if we take these distributed, decentralized data stores and we protect them with these DLTs and we put the intelligence in with the smart contracts, what we end up having is a global utility where our data goes that we then interface to these other platforms, these parallel platforms, the EHRs, right? And we can take the CCDA and start populating these PHRs now. We can take other things and start populating them. But in this world where we do Flatiron writ large, it's 1 billion or 2 billion people that have subscribed to this service, and some big brand is going to show up. This is where the money, this is where you need to be investing. Who's going to be the brand that figured out how to go do this without disrupting Epic and Cerner and so forth, right? I mentioned the 1968 thing. Trust me, these guys from 1968 with 50-year-old technology are not going to jump on and understand DLTs with smart contracts with these exotic filing systems. So somebody's going to come along. And what's really strange right now is this crazy idea of interoperability. If you look at the definitions of what various companies do to do interoperability, it's not really interoperable. It's some file transfers here and there, but it really doesn't benefit the patient. So what we need to get into is, what's this hard part now? So The stuff's just sitting there. We can take advantage of it. No one had to invent this. We don't have to invent it. It's there. Now it's about being smart. What companies are going to come along, organize around this stuff? So we need to have incentives. Okay? The cool thing about the Interplanetary filing system is it's got Filecoin next to it, so there's a tokenization to it, so we can figure out incentives back and forth. Someone might say they want, I'll put your data up there, let's do an exchange here. I'm going to actually do something with your data. Do you mind? Will you opt in? That's the Flatiron writ large, right? We can all say, I'll opt in. We're going to have de-identification processes and companies who do that for us. Our data is in this IPFS. There's de-identification processes that are happening. It's there. We're good with it. We can then go barter and use that. The more and more pressure is going to be on the market. So the implementation is there are going to be some brands that start to do this. There'll be some fighting amongst themselves, and some winner will come out of that. Then we need to integrate. So the integration goes between the EHRs that are traditional and this new thing. But what's really going to happen is the decentralization of patient record data will happen because there's no reason that any of our data should be in a centralized data center of some health system managed by the vendor that's managing the medical record system. It just shouldn't happen. So like I told you earlier, we moved all of Providence's data as a copy, as a mirror into the cloud. I got real-time applications running off that stuff on iPhones to providers. Since that can be done, then what we need to do is then create the technology to do those bridges and mirrors. So our PHRs are, a day will come where that data by the provider is not something that they're chasing and trying to make money off of. A lot of health systems want to make money. They want to be data companies. They're not. They should be caring for patients. But once we have the data out there in a way that's distributed, like I'm suggesting, it's going to be more valuable and more effective to all of us. And all the conversations that we're going around today about data and so forth, every single one of them leads back to this PHR that's done at a global scale. That's there, it's protected, it's decentralized, you can't be hacked, all that good stuff. The incumbents some of the incumbents are us. We might be fearful of putting something up there. So the big brands that figure this out better make it easy and understandable for us why we do that. The major EHR companies are not going to want to do this, but they got paid a lot of money for meaningful use. They got paid $33 billion for meaningful use to get providers to put our data in their systems that it's proprietary and centralized, and they're not safe. So the incumbents are going to fight this, and then the main thing we need to get to is adoption, right? Wide adoption. Wide adoption has to come from us wanting to do it, and from the major commercial brands that are coming to this. So one last thing I want to leave you with is just a good read on this. If you think I'm a little out there, hopefully you can tell I actually believe this. We can do this. But if you don't believe me, a really good, more contextually oriented book is The Life After Google. It's by George Gilder. He's been a futurist for many years, and he lays out the ideas here. And he was the one back in the 90s that said that we're going to have these personal devices that we can make phone calls on and collect our email and read our email and navigate the streets with. So he's one of these futurists for many, many years has been doing this. So I suggest you read that. And that's a really good argument for the new internet, and it really is an argument for life after EHRs. So anyway, I hope this has been somewhat enlightening. What's going to happen? I believe myself, but I see these things. Unfortunately, I don't always invest at the right time, but they're coming. So any questions about this? Technological, anything? Yeah.
I thought that was awesome, Jim. Thank you. So who's going to do this? Who's going to pull together these PHR building blocks?
Well, so if you go look at IPFS and you look at Filecoin, they spun it out. These guys are serious. This is like, they're Google-esque, they're Oracle-esque. These guys are pretty serious. I think they could pull it off. There are a bunch of other companies that are doing this as well. So back in the heyday, I had one of the first relational databases out there. But if you look at 1987 to about 1995, it was a big mad rush for client server, right? and you had Oracle and Sybase and Informix and IBM and Microsoft. I was actually Bill Gates' advisor for databases back then on which way he should go. And so you look at that whole rush there and what happened. You saw, finally end up with Oracle and Microsoft kind of at the end. That's the same thing that's going to happen here. So IPFS and Filecoin aren't focused on healthcare. They're focused on this generic solution. Neither was Oracle, right? So that's the kind of thing that'll happen. On the DLT side, we got these guys duking it out, EOS and Ethereum and other ones. And you got IOTA on the Internet of Things and so forth. And there are just hundreds of companies in this space. So you got to watch for the ones that are starting to make some, I believe, commercial inroads. I really like the idea of this sort of egalitarian Bitcoin thing. We can do it. We can be our own bank. We don't need the government. That only works in certain situations, like currency. It doesn't work over on the utility market. And you can't be doing this ridiculous, super inefficient mining for concurrency. That's ridiculous. So from a comp sci standpoint, where you want to be is you want to be behind technologies that are instantaneously fast, provenly to be secure and scalable and decentralized. And so I'm saying, like, I mentioned a couple I think that are going to work, but who knows? Yeah.
So this goes to a question Rick asked and also some of the comments you made. So there's this belief that it has to be an infrastructure play first. That has to be developed.
Yep.
And then apps will come. I think in reality it's much more complicated. It's got one is driving the other. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on that issue as well as
Yeah, good question. So, yeah. So infrastructure versus apps. So I'm going to go back to the Wayback Machine. So an IBM computer used to sell for about $5,000 when they first came out. The incentive to buy a $5,000 computer was a $500 product called Lotus 123. Right? So that's just an example that we remember way back when. People were spending that kind of money because they wanted that app. We don't have the app right now, right? On healthcare, the app doesn't exist. A lot of these periphery apps exist. Very good ones, but they're not the ones that are going to generate this groundswell, right? So I think we're going to see applications that really kind of figure out a better way in which Apple is currently doing stuff, where they take your CCDA from your provider and they download it and it's there, it's great, it's fantastic, it's right there. Someone else is going to figure out a way that says, like, well, we've done that, and here's an incentive behind that, and here's what you can do to get this, and here's how you can share it, and here's how we're part of this thing, and people are going to see that their loved ones are benefiting from research. It's going to take a while. I'm not saying this is happening tomorrow. We have to look at these 10-year cycles, and I'm totally behind Gartner's stuff on that. I actually have this is nuts. I'm not going to leave it up there for long, but you killed it.
I thought you were done.
That's okay. Yeah, that's good. That's fine. I had the 10-year plan every year, the step that happened and how it changed. Of course, it's ridiculous, right? But it at least tells us how we got to this PHR and what the integration points were and what had to happen and some fake names of companies that came along and so forth. But you can't predict that. But what you can do is you can absolutely know that there's a 5 and a 10-year cycle coming where really good investments can come that will change this industry. And I'm trying to be part of that. I'm right now fighting it out in the cloud right now. That's a challenge enough for healthcare. So now you get into blockchain and interplanetary filing systems and encryption and decentralization. Like, huh? What are you talking about? Well, I'm talking about that. It's going to happen. All right?
Okay.
Anything else?
Excellent.
All right.